Hey students, it's Emily Poole. Let's talk about topic 6.7, ideologies of change and reform movements, aka the isms. Students, what I actually need you to do right now is take out a sheet of paper for notes because I need to talk to you about the political spectrum, because everything that happens starting now for the rest of this course will fall somewhere in line in this political spectrum. And when I use these terms, you need to understand what I'm talking about. So on your sheet of paper, students, I need you to draw a line, and in the middle, you are going to make a little tick mark, and you're going to write the word moderate. Moderates are in the middle of the political spectrum. Slightly to the right of that, you are going to write the word conservative. Conservatives want to keep things the way that they are. They want the status quo to remain unchanged, whether that's politically, economically, or socially. They do not desire change because the way that the world is going in their eyes is great. Further to the right of conservatives, I need you to draw another tick mark and write the word reactionary. Reactionaries look at the way that the world is right now and say, no, things were better a long time ago. We need to go back to what it was like before. At the right side of that political spectrum, you have conservatives saying, we're fine now, and reactionaries saying, we were fine 100 years ago. Going back to your line on the left side of moderate, draw a tick mark and write the word liberal. Liberals desire change, and they desire small change through government interaction. Oftentimes, this is passing new laws to protect rights of people. So if we're looking at the Industrial Revolution, a lot of liberals were pushing for new working hours or wage laws that protected the working class. So unlike conservatives, liberals look at how things are going right now and they say, actually, things could be better. We could move forward and progress in certain ways. Back to that line, on the left of liberal, I need you to draw a tick mark and write the word radical. Radicals want extreme change as quickly as possible and will do anything to make that happen. Radicals are kind of dependent on their time period. It was radical in Britain in the 1800s to think that every male should have a right to vote. It was absolutely radical at the time to think that women should be allowed really anywhere in the political sphere. A lot of the conflict that ensues in this unit and later units is between liberals who want change and conservatives who want to keep things the same. Liberals like John Stuart Mill emphasize popular sovereignty, so rule by the people, and individual rights that must be protected by the government. Radicals, specifically in Britain, like the Chartists, demand universal male suffrage, not based on how much wealth you have or what family you came from. And some people, like the French utopian socialist Flora Tristan, believe that these universal voting rights should also be extended toward women. Speaking of socialism, let's now talk about the economic spectrum. And students, I again need you to draw a line in your notes. This time, it's going to be vertical. This line indicates government involvement in the economy. I'm going to give you a very basic overview of capitalism at the top, socialism in the middle, and let's put communism at the bottom. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership. People or entrepreneurs own land, labor, and capital and combine those things to profit as much as possible. If we're looking at the Industrial Revolution, this makes the most sense. Those factory owners are using land, labor, and their resources to produce more resources, which then makes them money. In capitalism, businesses can compete against each other for profit, which tends to keep prices down for consumers. But especially during the Industrial Revolution, capitalism also results in a very unequal wage gap. You have the factory owners who have all the money, you have this emerging middle class, and you have the factory workers, the bulk of society, who, especially as industrialization was first taking off, had nothing. And because capitalism, when left unchecked, can promote that uneven wage gap, socialists emerge trying to even that out more. Socialism argues that through government involvement, that wage gap will decrease because the government might be owning some of the land, labor, or capital. Or in the modern day, governments who operate under a socialist economy heavily tax people in order to even out that wage disparity. But this is not just for the government to keep money for themselves. They are then giving it back to their citizens through things like healthcare or housing or education. And communists take this a step further. They say, hey, this lowering of the wage gap is not enough. You know what we need to have happen? Everyone share everything equally. Private property is abolished. We don't need any of that anymore because left to our own devices, we will all share everything we need perfectly. Which is great in theory. I love the idea that we're all just kumbayaing and holding hands together. But students, you all know that one person who would just take control of everything and steal from everyone else. Which is why communism doesn't work. And also because when a government controls a communist economy, the government just keeps all of the money for themselves. With that foundation set, let's talk about Karl Marx and Marxism. Karl Marx, co-author of the Communist Manifesto, focused on how in a capitalist system, wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, the bourgeoisie, at the expense of the working class, the proletariat. Marx believed that society evolved based on economic systems. He believed that feudalism naturally gave way to capitalism, and that capitalism would naturally give way to socialism and ultimately communism. And he argued that those things naturally happened because of class struggle, this conflict between the working class and the owning class. As he says in the Communist Manifesto, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, or in a word, oppressor and oppressed. In his scientific socialism and then subsequent critique of capitalism, he literally studied history and economic development to prove why capitalism existed and why it was not the best economic form. And students, many women became socialists, utopian socialists, or Marxists in light of their relative equality. I mean, Marx believed that women and men were completely equal, which was a radical political stance at the time and led to people like Clara Zetkin and Rosa Luxemburg leading communist parties or eventually being murdered by the Berlin conservative police, respectively. The last ism that I want to talk about here is anarchism, which is the idea that governments do not need to exist because all governments are corrupt. Mikhail Bakunin himself became disillusioned with socialism and communism because he believed as soon as a capitalist government was overthrown and replaced with a socialist government, the socialist government would also be corrupt and unnecessary. So unlike utopian socialists who believe they should just become their own tiny little communities away from society, Bakunin argued that underground movements were necessary to live and revolt against the government at hand. Rather than all property being controlled by a government, all property needed to be controlled by workers who then worked collectively together, and therefore government was not needed because they provided all of the things that they needed for themselves. We got the isms. I hope that helped. I know this was a little bit of a longer one, but as always, students, you can do it. I believe in you.